Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World 100, episode 132, I should say. I'm John Jordan, and joining me today we have Aaron Bierschmidt, who is the CEO of Laguna Games, best known for crypto unicorns. How's it going, Aaron?
I'm doing fantastic, John. Thanks for having me, man.
Good, absolutely a pleasure. We've met a few times um, uh, in the last few months, and I've been playing crypto unicorns for a while, so plenty to talk about, and hopefully some interesting sneak peeks into what's going on in the future. But I guess let's start where we are now. So you've been running crypto unicorns for a year. It's been a I don't know, how would you describe that year? Just normal year of running a game.
It's been a wild roller coaster ride for sure. We on May 5th of this year celebrated 365 days of live operations
Yeah.
of a real economy.
Yeah.
And it's been a wild ride to date. Kind of surviving the bear market as well, because I'm pretty good at timing. Like, we started Laguna January of 2020, right before COVID was kicking off. Right, we launched the game May 5th of 2022, which is literally the week the market kind of shit the bed and it's all started to kind of fall apart. So building in the bear has certainly been rather fun and rather interesting.
And I guess it's sort of even before the game went live. It's coming back a bit. I think your NFTs you sort of went live, sort of almost like the sort of peak or the sort of end bit of the bull market. Was it like, I'm thinking sort of February or something? I can't remember, but I remember you sort of we sort of had Axiom. Everyone was like, "What's next?" And you were like in that sort of next wave of games. Everyone was looking for what's happening next. So you really were sort of caught up in all that sort of hysteria.
Very much so. I mean, that was an incredible time, right? Like January of 2022, we launched the Dark Forest smart contract, which was how we launched the Shadowcorn NFT collection. And there was $100 million in total value being locked in that contract every single day, right? I had an investor claim that he was on a yacht with Scarlett Johansson and showed her the Dark Forest, right? I mean, just like the level of kind of mania and insanity that was that kind of end of the bull. So you're right. We did. I've been a software entrepreneur for going on 15 years now, and this is the first time I think I ever really truly timed something correctly. Obviously, we've taken some hits across the board, like many projects, all projects have in the space since then. But I mean, it allowed us to build and kind of bootstrap the treasury that we have to date, which has given us years of runway, right? So, it was quite a thing.
No, but I guess, I mean, that is the sort of interesting sort of point, I guess, where we've seen sort of some projects, lots of projects were alive at that sort of time, went through that sort of trajectory, probably not quite as many, not quite as from got the highs that you guys did, but it's sort of as much as is within your control in terms of not doing stupid things like keeping money in a treasury. That means no matter what happens, you've got however many years of runway left. Not all games did that. Some games obviously did really stupid things and then basically not really so much their fault, but because of how the market was playing out, they just sort of didn't have the ability to then keep going. So in a sense, a lot of it's outside your control, but the bits that are in your control, you've sort of played those cards as well as could be expected, I guess.
Definitely. I mean, we've certainly scaled the team up and scaled burn up, but with runway well through the end of next year, right? Like, I'm sitting pretty and feel very fortunate, frankly, to be in the position that we're in. I've got a lot of fellow friends and entrepreneurs in the space who are either didn't fundraise or now very much struggling to in the current market. I mean, despite everything, like, we've been able to kind of survive. My kind of pitch to the team right as the market was collapsing was like, all right, for many of you, this is your first bear market. Like, this isn't going to be fun. The name of the game is survival. Let's just keep our heads down, stay focused, continue to ship, and continue to deliver for our community. And I really believe that you can't point to another project that's delivered more across all these different fronts, not just core game updates, but updates to the website, updates to our staking system. It's been a whole thing. And I came into the crypto space in 2017, like many people. So this is not my first bear, right? 2018, 2019 really my first bear. And so I do think that experience has helped me kind of take the, you saw the projects that survived that and have, continued to thrive. And yeah, that's certainly our plan.
Cool. So I realise we've sort of headed straight into the sort of murky waters of sort of the bull and the bear, but we've not really sort of defined actually what crypto unicorns is. So how would, I guess, going back a little bit, why did you? And I guess we've had this discussion. It's sort of funny that crypto unicorns obviously sort of isn't, just as a term, is interesting because it's the unicorns. Obviously, we all know that in sort of market speak for a company's worth $1 billion. But equally, you are making a game around these cute little unicorns, and even now that sort of theme is not something that we see a lot of in sort of crypto blockchain gaming. It tends to be a lot more sort of mature, dark fantasy sort of stuff. That's sort of where the audience is. So how did maybe kind of rewind a little bit? Why did you think this was going to be a project that sort of worked? Because your history was making 4X mobile games, which again were not, I don't think, had cute little unicorns in them, did they? So
yeah. It's funny because we pivoted from building the next Game of Thrones 4X game, right? House of the Dragon for WB. That's kind of that is what we were doing before we pivoted in August of 2021. So yeah, it was kind of a complete 180. Crypto unicorns, the original idea, I actually came up with in early 2018 after playing Crypto Kitties. And I was like, okay, this is just a breeding game. I want to do something with these cats, right? And so the original design was a very simple breeding game with a racing game. And the idea, so it would have looked very similar to like a Zed Run or a Pegaxi. But at the time, right, Crypto Kitties had completely clogged the Ethereum network. It was just insanity. And I just thought, okay, the time is not now. And I just put that idea on the shelf. And so years later, as we're struggling with WB, they were kind of making acqui-hire noises. I'd been through that several times at this point and just knew it wasn't going to be the opportunity we started the company for. And I started looking at like, well, what's next? And it was very clear to me that like mobile free to play was not the place for a small developer to be. It's just a bloodbath. And when you have, now companies like Playtica saying no more mobile games, right? Like crazy, you just see the extent to which that market has matured and become a red ocean. And I had been trading crypto and actively managing a couple of funds that I started in 2020. Another wave I caught correctly was kind of the COVID crash. And I'd moved a lot of my trading activity to Polygon. Polygon was fast, cheap. I didn't think that players would care about the security trade-off between Ethereum mainnet and Polygon as a side chain. And then seeing kind of Axie explode, it was just like, okay, there's something very interesting happening here. I remember watching Twitch and YouTube videos of Axie over a weekend, just like 12 hours of videos. And I'm like, that's all, right? And so I went to the team. I just went to the team. I started with our design director, Jeff Witt, who's, he co-founded Storm 8, co-founded Funzio. Like he is a OG free-to-play game designer. And I just said, do you think you can do better? Right? Like, and very clearly we could see that the economy was very weak, very thin, very brittle, and wasn't going to be sustainable. So it was just very easy from our lens to say, okay, let's pivot out of this really mature blood red ocean, because Forex strategy is the bloodiest portion of the mobile free-to-play ocean anyway, right? Like, let's get out of here. Let's go into the dark forest of blockchain game development, like just light a torch and just run. And so a big part of that pitch was like, let's do it. So, I'm like, hey, by the way, I've got this thing I've been thinking about, which is called crypto unicorns. And everybody kind of asked me the same question you did, which is like, why unicorns? And I was like, why not? In a world where crypto punks and Bored Ape Yacht Club is a thing, and like Meebits and all those early projects that had been seeing success, the pattern to me was they weren't taking themselves too seriously. They were all a little absurd. They again, and like unicorns are clearly a fiction that is globally appealing. Almost every culture has some form of a unicorn kind of myth, right? Unicorns were already a part of crypto culture. You see Vitalik and stuff rocking these crazy unicorn t-shirts at conferences and things. And so it just felt like a really good fit, not only for the crypto natives, which that's been a big part of our thesis, is like build a beachhead around crypto natives first and position ourselves for the coming wave of normies, right? Like I believe over time, as we've seen already, we will continue to see growth and more people entering the space naturally. And I want to be the arcade in the metaverse, right? That everybody's like, oh, wow, unicorns, fun, let's go, right? So it felt like a really good IP to attract early adopters as well as be positioned for success now. And I'll tell you real quick, like, we're already seeing like great success on Facebook campaigns right now in terms of click-through rate. Like click-through rates I would have killed for, nearly 5% right now, which I just, with Stallone's face on Battle Strike Force, which was the Forex strategy game, right? Like we were seeing maybe 1.5%, right? With one of the most recognizable stars, in history, right? And so to see unicorns beating that already in the US, targeting, high LTV players, like it's been great to see. It seems to validate that thesis that like even normal people are just attracted to this IP. And one thing I'll just note here, I take zero credit for the actual unicorns that we came up with. Huge shout out to our art team, Bo, our art director. Like it was the buck tooth on the unicorn. The second we had a concept with that buck tooth, it was just like, that's the one. And so it's my favorite IP of anything I've ever had the fortune of touching and working on. And huge shout out to the team for kind of coming up with something that clearly resonates.
Yeah. It has that sort of a goofy feel, but not a stupid feel. It has a sort of, that interesting sort of tension, and particularly now, because I mean, it should say sort of when the game came out, it was mainly a sort of had that sort of farming 4X sort of thing where you had these sort of farm lands and you were growing different resources that you could use in different ways. And then over the last kind of couple of months, you've brought out the jousting game, which obviously brings a new sort of obviously new gameplay mode. It's, in a sense, it's a P2P combat mode or a sort of group combat mode. But it's still with these sort of quirky sort of unicorns sort of colliding into each other.
It's we just lean. One of the statements I kept making to the team was lean into the absurdity. So that's why we have people collecting unicorn poop, right? Like, so people play the game on average over an hour a day, normally across 5+ sessions. We see like our DAO MAU ratio, our stickiness is 67%. It's been increasing, right? So the majority of our players play daily. And I think we have, something like almost 20,000 unicorn poop collection events a day or whatever. So there's been this thing where it was just like very early on, I just encouraged people like, oh, that's a silly idea. Ship it, right? Like just, they're unicorns, they're magical, they can do anything. Don't have any restrictions on what you think is possible. And it's served us well.
And I think, as we've discussed before, you can play it, as I'm sure, I play it at a very sort of high level, just sort of like not really any strategy, just sort of like, sort of going in, a lot of it's on timers. So you sort of go in and do your daily sort of stuff, right? Whereas if you discuss, there are some people who have these, as in every game that can be done in, people who have these massive Excel spreadsheets and they're looking to see exactly what they should be farming, and they're should point out there's a market in there, so you can buy and sell seeds and the sort of finished fruits, which is all on it's a P2P from players sort of selling them. So there are these people who take it, very seriously.
Yeah, I mean, with the recent jousting meta changes, we kind of refactored jousting. It's been phenomenally successful. This shipped last week. The prices of the entry tickets into Joust have spiked enormously. And a lot of players were speculating on that happening and have been very successful in that play. And you craft these tickets, right? So you had players who were actually crafting these tickets in their workshops and stuff. And so you called out something that's really important, which is the Rainbow Token Marketplace, which is a day one feature for us, has been this phenomenally successful feature in that it made everything inside of the game, the portion of the off-chain economy, real, because the vast majority of the commodities or items in the game are paired against our governance token, RBW. And again, it's players trading amongst themselves. So price movement is not controlled by us. As a matter of fact, like we don't have a lever really to control that other than volatility, because we can change the liquidity of the pools. And to date, counting the price of RBW every single day, which has gone down drastically, right? But counting the price every single day, we're nearing 10 million in trading volume just in the Rainbow token marketplace, with, call it, 2,300 or so monthly active wallets, right? And so it's been that in and of itself to me has been a really cool thing that worked out. That was an early thing. I thought this will actually help us balance the game, right? Because the market will decide on these things. And to see prices, and you can look back historically, there's been plays where players got out ahead of a certain commodity, had a bunch, and then sold it as the price went up around certain things. But you called out something that's really important. It's like we have players like my own grandmother who plays daily. She loves it, right? She's been playing mobile free-to-play games forever. It was actually my grandma that really got me into games, like playing Bejeweled on her PC back in the day. Yeah. Yeah. The funny thing is my mom wouldn't let me play, my brother or I play games for a while. And so to get revenge on her, obviously I started a gaming company at 19. So, and I've been mostly doing that ever since. But yeah, it's been a really interesting mix of players. We have the spreadsheet warriors who, I've never seen the level of like depth and complexity and time that people have put into trying to figure out what's going on in the experience. We have players that post daily price updates, on the internal in-game commodities and stuff, which I find really cool. And then we have people like my grandmother. There's this wonderful woman who goes by Island Girl on our Discord, and we found out she lives in Florida, is in her 60s, has a whole group of friends that play the game. And that I really like that. It's not just DeFi degens that are playing this game, right? We have this really interesting mix of people, which is what you wanted in free to play. You wanted whales, you wanted grinders, you wanted people who are more casual. And everything we're trying to do in building out the overall game ecosystem, which started with the launch of Jousting and some of the upcoming games that we have, is to try to bring different types of players in, which will bring them into this ecosystem, bring them into the economic network, right? And add value to it overall, right? So I think one thing we are doing that's rather different is trying to target a variety of players, but obviously bring them together around the same core IP and economy.
So I should point out the Crypto Unicorns, as currently available, is a browser game. So people, I guess, may play it through their phones, but probably I imagine the vast majority is people playing on desktop PC. So obviously that has that sort of forces, not necessarily forces, but there's a certain play pattern that you get on mobiles that you get with desktops, and you're on the desktop side of things. But you announced earlier in the year a whole bunch of they are new games, but they are sort of I don't know how you call them, sort of not really companion apps in the way that they're companion apps, but they're sort of within the universe, aren't they? They're in their sort of they're using the Crypto Unicorns characters in various ways and in different sort of genres. And at the moment, you actually have some play tests going on with a match 3 game and an RPG as well. So where do you want to start on that? Because there's quite a lot. I mean, how many with the titles you're testing, is it six games in development or something? I can't. Maybe I'm losing track.
I mean, counting Jousting, it's basically 6 game loops are in development simultaneously.
And some of those. Some of those are internal and some of those are with external developers as well, aren't they? Should point out.
Correct, yeah. And that's the one unique thing is we've really built a platform that has allowed truly external game devs to like tap into our backend, tap into our art pipeline so that they can get the unicorns rendered as close as they, almost nearly identical to how they're rendered in the core game. And so there's been a lot of work that the engineering team does not get enough credit for to kind of open up our platform enough to allow other developers to come in and build. So going through the gauntlet, I mean, you mentioned the Team RPG playtest, which is about to end later this week. We've been doing that, I think, going on 6 weeks now. That was this phenomenal opportunity to basically present 2 separate Team RPG loops, the match 3 one and more of an auto battle one. let the community play both, and then ultimately via a governance vote decide which one they want to be our team RPG game loop. So this is one of our many governance experiences. We have the most active game DAO on the planet to date, and no one else has allowed the players to make such. We literally let and allow the players to make true meta and economic decisions. Like, just to give you a quick example, 45 days ago, an internal group of players came forward with a proposal completely outside of anything that, we were uninvolved, to raise the breeding and evo cost, as well as the cost to get new land out of the land vending machine, which is how we mint land over time and how we've actually, I think, are one of the few projects that has ongoing primary sell revenue. So that's, been this kind of incredible thing. But the player community debated amongst each other. Ultimately, the council, which is elected group of player members, approved this to go to Snapshot. And then the SRBW token holders, again, without our involvement or voting on it, voted on this very aggressive version. They had all the options of no change all the way to very aggressive, and they went very aggressive. And that in and of itself is fascinating to me. The fact that we've got this group of players, this community across 136 countries globally. So we're covering the gambit of socioeconomic status, right? Or tier, however you want to describe it globally, right? And we got them to all collectively vote against their short-term self-interest and in the long-term interest of the DAO and the economy. And then in less than 30 days, we were able to push those changes. So we've built a little bit of a governance machine. And one of the things that I always kind of come back to is, like, in Forex strategy on mobile, I always kind of was like, players spend so much time and money in these games, right? They really do, right? You would have players that would spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in these games. And you eventually kind of get to the point where you're like, okay, it's status, it's wanting to be king, it's the social mechanics of your guild against another guild, right? It's the whole, I'm buying rounds of drinks at the bar for my friends and that kind of stuff, right? But they never had control of the sandbox. The developer was always in control of the sandbox. And in our world, the players are actually in control. We, of course, maintain a veto right. That veto right doesn't last forever, particularly if players continue to stake as much as they have. Like, over 60% of the circulating supply of our governance token is staked on average for 10 months or more. So players really care, right, about the direction that the game is headed. And it's part of the experiment we're running here, John, which is like, I'm going to give you control of the sandbox over the next 18 months to 2 years is about when it will flip, and I will no longer be in control of the DAO. And that experiment really, I just find fascinating, right? And I really think it's one of the advantages of the space that most developers won't touch, because it's insane at face value to give players so much agency and power. But to me, it's always been a bit of a mismatch. If you're giving players high agency over the assets, but not over anything else, what are you really doing, right? And so, we're one of the few projects outside of maybe groups like Decentral Games that I think are really taking a approach towards progressive decentralization and taking the idea of this being a game DAO serious. And we'll see if it works, but it's been a fun experiment.
I mean, in my limited experience of it, I think part of the sort of decision making to have a DAO, and obviously you sort of want to shape it in a certain way and give it a certain period of time in which to sort of mature and sort of leaders to emerge who are going to show some sort of sustained involvement in the project. But sort of I always kind of think certainly on a short term level, you'd almost hope that some DAOs are going to make some terrible decisions because sort of that's sort of the freedom they have. So they obviously you don't give them $1 billion worth of tokens on day one and say get on with it. As you say, that is a short period of time. But you sort of you don't obviously hope they make terrible mistakes. But that's sort of, once you've said we're doing this is sort of what we do as a blockchain game, then you sort of would get a little bit worried if all they're doing is sort of making the decisions that you would have made anyway, because then that's sort of what's the point. So I do think there is that sort of envelope of optionality. Some of those decisions have to come out badly, and if in 24 months they go to the treasury and say we want to take all the money from the treasury and give it to ourselves. Maybe that's
Well, there are certain restrictions, right? Like we are building. We're about to announce a little bit of alpha here, a transition to an unincorporated nonprofit as far as the DAO, the treasury itself, right? Giving it a meat space entity. So the Crypto Unicorns IP will be going up into that, nonprofit. And part of that charter is, hey, you cannot, just distribute the treasury to the token holders. The token holders can vote on how the treasury is invested, but very specifically around furthering the Crypto Unicorns IP. And the goal there is obviously to make this a generational IP, like we kind of called out in the white paper. So there are some restrictions there. And obviously no one wants a token, which is not a security, to be classified as a security, particularly here in the United States. And so anyway, there are some restrictions on what the token holders can do. But yeah, I mean, I just come back to how engaged and, engagement, monetization, and retention, I feel are going to be much higher when players truly have ownership and control over the direction of the IP. That is the kind of core of the experiment that we're running on the governance side here. And it's something that so far I think is really proving out, because you can play lip service to it, but eventually the community catches on. We've seen this with other groups masquerading as DAOs in the space, and I'll kind of leave it at that. I think our community really appreciates, the direction that we've headed here. And yeah, it is a little scary. At some point we could get voted out as the core game developer, right? But part of me is also kind of like, that experiment is just, I want to see how this plays out. I really want to see it. I want to be in a position one day where Laguna Games is not necessary to furthering this IP. And that will mean, in my eyes, we've won. Like what we've set out to achieve has occurred. So yeah, ongoing daily experiment. You asked about the games, and we got off track on governance, but that was the Team RPG side of things. So that goes to Snapshot here in the next couple of weeks. It'll be crazy exciting to see whether the community votes for the Match 3 kind of Puzzles and Dragons, Legendary Game of Heroes style of game, or the Autobattler. I've made the best case for, I think Match 3 is a better overlap and less crowded competitive space and easier on-ramp. And it's going to be, this to me is actually the first example of they may not make the choice that I would make, John, and we'll see. We'll see. But it's great. You go in our Discord right now and you've got people campaigning for each type. And that, I love seeing that level of discussion and involvement. So that's Team RPG. Then we basically have 3 second-party titles that are not being developed by the core team at Laguna. The first of which is Unicorn Party. Unicorn Party launches at the end of this month. It is a series of casual core games. They are all skill-based, real-time PvP. So we took popular kind of hyper-casual IO loops, like the bumper one, right, the mob one. And we've basically gone, okay, this is actually real-time PvP. There are no bots. So you're playing against real players using, Photon's real-time matchmaking. You basically purchase tickets with our currencies and wager those tickets on the outcome of these matches. And so one thing that's going to be kind of interesting, and at face value, it just looks like we're doing all these different things. I promise you they all kind of fit together. Like all of our games sit on a spectrum of nothing's pure RNG, right? But a lot of stats-based games to date, right? Unicorn Party kind of represents the first truly skill-based title, right? Which we hope attracts a certain type of skill-based gamer who's very excited to kind of bet on their own skill and obviously see that through. So it's going to be very fascinating because obviously the purchase of these tickets adds value to our economy. If you're utilizing a unicorn in Unicorn Party, it can't be used on the farm. So every single corn that goes off to play those loops, you need to replace it on the farm. And we've already shown that with a few thousand wallets, there's a need for over 140,000 unicorns, right? So that's just showing kind of the scale of the economy that we have relative to a lot of games like Axie, Peg Axie, Zed-Run. Only a very small subset of the NFTs are really useful, right? at any given point in time. And the one thing we've differentiated is that no, you actually need to use all of these assets daily. I have 100 something unicorns that I deploy every day, right? So it's kind of fascinating. Anyway, so Unicorn Party, I think is going to be a really compelling experiment for us. It's our first mobile title as well, so it's cross-platform WebGL. We're starting with Android first. Obviously, everything we build is in Unity, so we have the ability to go iOS. I'm kind of going to let a few other developers get through that black box review process, and then once the guidelines are a little more clear, we'll try it.
I could say it is interesting, isn't it? Axie's just got something live at the moment, and NFL Rivals also have something live, which I mean, having looked at
I'm always somewhat suspicious of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
The current guidance is just give us 30% and we'll let you do it. And I'm like, that's not really how NFTs work, right? OpenSea's fees 2.5%. We take 2.5% on secondaries. So we shall see how those go and the level at which they're actually integrated with NFTs.
Yes, no, it's very light. It's very light. Way integrated.
Exactly. And part of me is like, how much are you like? The last thing I want to do is turn into a free to play company, because at that point you are just competing with free to play. You're back in the red ocean. What is your unique strategy to get over it? And I worry about that. That's one of the reasons that our thesis has been so focused on like build extreme depth and breadth into the economy, like really focus on being able to monetize high LTV players and these things, right? Where a lot of companies, it's like no one, John, this is one thing that drives me crazy in the space. It's like no one is at the point we're at where they actually have a live working economy. They're doing like we're doing performance marketing and things, right? And I try to talk to other developers and nobody's here yet, right? So nobody's even really thought about the idea of like, one day to build a successful business, I need to be able to acquire customers under my LTV, right? And so a lot of these games, especially those that are a little more casual, even mid-core, you're like, are you going to be able to acquire customers profitably, right? And I'm sitting over here with a 400 plus average revenue per wallet, right? I'm looking at day 180 retention of nearly 40%, 38% to be exact. A week one retention of 75%. So again, it's one of these things where you're like, anytime I get down, I look around and I'm like, oh, we are very far into the dark forest with this tiny little torch. And, we're just going to kind of keep running ahead and learning. But I do worry about a lot of games in the space that are like, hey, so at face value, Unicorn Party would be a very hard game to like scale. But in our ecosystem, it's just the top of the funnel. Ideally, somebody comes in, starts playing Unicorn Party, goes, jousting looks fun. They go start playing some jousting. I'm tired of buying potions from the marketplace. I want to craft my own potions. Well, how do I do that? I buy a piece of land, which is a primary sell revenue for us, right? And so I've kind of been really focused on reinforcing to the internal team, like it's a funnel. It starts with games that are like Unicorn Party, and ideally they go to the mid-core jousting loops and then down into the core farm sim, right? So we're going to be very focused on tracking conversion metrics on that front. Unicorn Party, I should say too, also has a free-to-play version so that you can at least try it. And I think the strength of the IP relative to hyper-casual games, right, even casual core games, is going to get downloads just kind of naturally as we get on the Google Play Store and the Epic Games Store. And so I'm excited to kind of run that test. There'll be kind of tournaments that we'll run that if you win that tournament free to play, you can get a free unicorn, and now you can kind of start to play the next tier. And so I'm going to be very curious to see like, what is that conversion rate? How does it grow and scale? So that's Unicorn Party. And then the next big one is Rainbow Rumble. And so Rainbow Rumble is being built by the Devoted team, Devoted Studios. They did Blankos Block Party.
Yep.
I hope Mythical doesn't get too mad at me there, but I'm pretty sure that's public knowledge. So basically, Rainbow Rumble is kind of our race game. It's a wipeout style Fall Guys meets unicorns, and I'm pretty excited about that because you'll have these little consumable kind of burn cards that you can fire over the course of the matches, and again represents a more kind of mid-core on ramp. But you only need one unicorn to start to play, right? Okay. So you're talking about less than the cost of a traditional game at this point, right? Because a unicorn you probably get for about $18 right now. And I'm just excited to kind of see, do these help open up the funnel, right? While still having the like economic depth to drive people down into over time, right? And the goal is that leads to economic sustainability in the actual system that we've built.
And for Rainbow Rumble, what do you think about sort of platform-wise on that one? Are you doing everything sort of PC, mobile? Is that the sort of plan?
Yeah, we're going to go cross-platform with that one as well. I think the advantage is, again, it's all in Unity, and the goal is to eventually be everywhere. I have no desire to not be on mobile, right? It's just the platforms are not being very receptive. I will say I'm very happy to see some of the legislation in like Europe where they're now allowing competitor app stores on the devices. I think we will see Web3 based, blockchain based kind of or focused app stores. And I think that'll be great. We plan to kind of be everywhere. And yeah, I mean, it's been funny as we spent, all of our careers for the most part in mobile, right? And then we pivoted to kind of WebGL. And I don't think we get enough credit for what we've been able to do in the single thread browser, right? And we're looking at options like partnerships with Hyperplay around doing desktop downloadables via their game launcher and stuff. And so the kind of, we plan to go more and more cross-platform in the midterm.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting to see, certainly on the sort of the PC side, how I mean, I don't think many of those sort of platforms have. I mean, obviously they don't have a Steam type audience, but you mentioned Epic Games, so obviously pretty big. I mean, it's starting to be quite active on the blockchain side, although I don't think driving that many downloads and all these other things like Hyperplay, you say, from Gamer7, and there's a few sort of other ones. So it's interesting to it's always good to have competition in that space to see. And I guess we just wait. It's harder to do that on mobile, clearly, because it's not an open platform in the same way. Well, not like how PC is, but I guess that would be if someone could get that to stick, sort of mobile store. But that's probably a bit of a way off, hopefully. I would think. Cool.
Yeah, exactly.
So, cool. So thanks for that. We've had a rush through where Crypto Unicorns is, and certainly where it's going. And so I guess kind of final question: how much do you? Obviously, you're sort of working hard and you're building a lot of stuff. And for you, someone running one of these companies, does the sort of market conditions? Obviously, they are massively influential on what happens. But at this stage, do you just even worry about them anymore? It's just sort of like, what happens. That's not in our control, as we've sort of been discussing in terms of DAOs and stuff. Some things you're in control of, other things you're not. And if you're not in control of them, you just sort of have the cards fall.
I personally don't worry about it very much because I've just seen this before and I believe in the overall direction of the space. What I have recognized is most of my team has not been, this is their first bear market. So matter of fact, town hall, all hands tomorrow. And I'm going to very specific. I've got this slide already prepared, which shows like, hey, even the last 30 days have not been great in NFT land, right? Volume is down. Number of trading wallets is down. In that same period of time, we've increased daily active wallets by 20%. Our revenue is up over 100%, 60% of that revenue from new players. And so I'm trying to kind of call out, like, listen, during the bull market, everybody was saying 99% of these projects are going to go to zero. And now we're actually seeing that occur, as it was always going to, because it's very hard to build a successful, sustainable ecosystem in this space, right? And so that this is fine meme, right? But like we're actually doing okay relative to these projects that are just burning around us, right? And I see our two largest competitors not executing well. They're potentially a little better at us at hyping things that don't matter. And I just don't think they can keep that up forever relative to just what we're doing, which is just consistently shipping new updates, actively involving the community, building this huge ecosystem kind of across the board. Each one of these game loops is kind of an experiment. We may say Unicorn Party be the thing that kicks us off, or Rainbow Rumble.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention Unagachi, which is our little kind of
Yes.
like toy thing, which is now getting way more compelling with all this AI stuff that's happening. So there's some really interesting stuff that I'm just going to kind of tease and leave it at that we're thinking about doing with Unagachi. I always wanted a unicorn friend, right?
Yeah.
And so I look at that and I'm just like, compared to everything else that's happening in the space, I actually think that we're not only surviving, but dare I say thriving a bit. And I'm that motivates me, right? And I'm like, great, let's just keep executing, keep growing and scaling to the extent that we can. I think the decision to focus on crypto natives was a very, very good decision, because where are the people now, right? And they're the only ones who are here that believe in this stuff, that care about it. And so I think that was a very smart decision. And so trying to build that beachhead and then be a position to be like the place to come when the next wave occurs is really what's top of mind. So yeah, it's something where I don't personally worry about it a lot, but definitely have realized team members and stuff, it can be very depressing to just read the headlines and see what's happening and stuff. And even just, the environment in the US is not great. And I think if you're reading the headlines, you have a certain impression of that. Yeah. Personally, I'm seeing a lot of representatives run on pro crypto platforms. Elizabeth Warren not getting a co-sponsor on her like anti-crypto bill is a big sign that hey, this isn't really working. Like I'm going with the Polygon team to Capitol Hill at the beginning of June to talk to Daniel McHenry, who was actually the guy that grilled the shit out of Gary Gensler a few weeks back. And so you need to look further than the headlines. I actually do think we're going to see some positive change. I'm certainly someone that believes money controls politics. That's just the truth. And crypto gives the people control of money. And I think it's too big to put back in the box, right? And so I'm a little more optimistic. And maybe that just comes from like the 2018, 2019 bear, seeing the COVID crash. I mean, for the year we had last year for Ethereum to be over 1,500 is like crazy, because I saw it hit 98. You want to see real fear.
I remember.
Right. So, I mean, it's been a wild ride. It's been a wild ride. I wrote a kind of State of the Union pretty early in the year. And in that, I said, it's likely to get worse before it gets better. And I'm glad I said that. I mean, I think it will continue to be a very volatile, very challenging market. And again, it's good to see that we've got some positive traction, right? In the current environment, to actually be moving up into the right, I think is really very exciting. And I just want to see that trend continue. And I think we'll be really well positioned.
Good. On that positive note, I would say, Aaron, thank you very much for your time and for your deep analysis of what's going on there. Good to talk again.
Always. Appreciate it, John.
And thanks to you for watching, listening, however you're consuming the podcast. Remember, every episode we're talking to the people who are forming this crazy world of, new form of gaming where, I think as Aaron well described, players are owning these assets and taking control for the first time. And I think, this is where the most interesting stuff in gaming is happening. I hope you agree. I hope you subscribe. And come back next time to see what's going on in the world of blockchain games. Goodbye.